Hi everybody, welcome to Jack, Laura, and Corner. I am Jack or Jackie. And it is time for Top 5 Wednesday! Yay! And if you happen to be new here, Top 5 Wednesday is a group that I'm in on Goodreads, where, hosted by Sam from Thoughts on Tomes and originally created by Sam and Ginger Reads Laney. This is a Goodreads group where you are given a topic, 5 topics, 5 or 4 topics each month, one to do each Wednesday of the month. And of course, it's October, so there is a bit of a theme this month. I did not get to do last week's topic, and, I think because I was away those first few days and everything, and then, I come back and have to go to class. The Monday I come back, and then the Wednesday, and then, work and stuff, so I didn't really get a chance. And besides the fact that it was, your top 5 magic systems, and I couldn't really think of any that I hadn't already mentioned because she's done this topic before. And I didn't want to use the same magic systems again, and even at that time, I don't think it was a very good selection. I mean, it was a good selection, but my presentation, I feel like, wasn't that great. I didn't say a lot. And, I feel like I'm trying to get more into reading more fantasy and not just the paranormal stuff, or young adult fantasy. I'm reading more adult fantasy and stuff, so it's all, well, I guess I could have said the Allomancy or Misting, and maybe the Antari magic, but I still didn't have enough. So I didn't do last week's topic, but I am doing the next 4 topics of the month. So this week's topic is your top 5 favorite villains. This is still kind of hard, and I'm sure the ones I've used on here I said before, because again, I think this was a topic that they've done before, which nothing is wrong with that, and these are good topics. So, anyway, let's get started. Okay. So, number 1, and these are really no in particular order, just whichever ones I thought of first. And that is the villain in one of my favorite sci-fi series, and it's not staying flat. And that is Queen Lavanna from the Lunar Chronicles. This is a sci-fi retelling of some fairy tales, particularly Cinderella, Snow White, Rapunzel, and Little Red Riding Hood. And Queen Lavanna is the main villain. She's the villain. She's supposed to be the evil queen of Snow White. But she is also the aunt of the Cinderella type character as well. She's the aunt and the stepmother, the original Snow White story of the Snow White character. Now, I did say that this book was I was about this particular book, which is the origin story of Queen Lavanna, which I'm glad that we got it. It was definitely a good story, It wasn't just but it just wasn't wow for me in this particular case. This book wasn't anyway, compared to the rest of the series. But it was very interesting. And I think part of the reason is because it didn't feel as original as I would have liked it to be. I mean, with the exception of the whole magic, the form of power that she has, that Queen Lavanna has. Because, in case you don't know, in this series, like I said, it's a sci-fi retelling, and there are, we've had several world wars now, and the world is divided into the world has been divided, and some of the people have gone to form a colony on the moon, which they call them the Lunars. And Queen Lavanna is one of the people that lives on the moon. And the Lunars, most of them have this special power where they can manipulate your bio, they can basically manipulate your mind, your thoughts. They can control. It's kind of a mind control. Like they can manipulate the bioelectricity in your brain, so they can make you see what you want to see, make you feel what they want you to feel. And Queen Lavanna, in this origin story, when she's a young woman, there's this man that I think he's a guard that she falls in love with, but of course he's a guard, so he's not someone she should want to marry. But he also doesn't really feel the same way about her she feels about him. He's in love with another woman. And it's basically about Lavanna is trying to, like, get him to fall in love with her. But instead of doing it the traditional way of flirting and trying to find out his interest and spending time with him and all that stuff like normal people would, she uses her powers to control him. And it's and you kind of pity her because she doesn't realize how villainous her behavior is. She doesn't see herself as a bad guy. She sees herself as a victim, which makes a true good villain. So as much as I didn't like her story, and I liked her, I liked her as a villain. I think she was a really, really good and really scary as a villain. And what I was about to say was that the reason why this book was just okay to me was it felt a little too similar to Once Upon a Time, their version of the Evil Queen, Regina Mills' story. The only difference being that Regina does not have this power to manipulate bioelectricity in the brain. She does have magic, though. Because, of course, you can't have a fantasy story without at least a little bit of magic. So, she does have magic, so she probably could, so she kind of can do a similar thing. It's just she can't directly manipulate your brain waves. So, but other than that, it felt a little too, it felt a little similar because Regina falls in love with not a guard, but a stable boy, and her mother doesn't approve of that. And to be fair, there are differences. Like I said, he's a stable boy. The love interest for Regina is a stable boy, and the mother ends up ripping out his heart and killing him. Spoiler alert. And so it is different, but it still kind of had a similar feel. And I guess it's kind of hard to do a sob story without it being similar to something else. So maybe my criticism isn't fair. But like I said, I didn't feel like, oh my god, this is the best story ever. I wasn't like wowed by it. I wasn't excited about the story. But I was entertained by it and I did enjoy it. But either way, my point is though, despite the fact that I was like not wowed by her backstory, and maybe it's also partly because this was a novella, so I was expecting more from it. I wanted more from it. But either way, she is still an amazing villain. She's like a terrifying villain because she doesn't think what she's doing is wrong, and the fact that she can manipulate people's bioelectricity and practically mind control them is scary. And she doesn't realize she doesn't see herself as a bad guy. She sees herself as a beautiful, innocent victim, and she desperately wants people to see her a certain way. So she changes her appearance so that she's seen as the most beautiful woman in the world. And that's scary. It doesn't take her any effort either. All she has to do is brainwash people, make them see what she wants them to see. Like in real life, medieval times, women, it wasn't that easy for a woman to make herself. She had to put on a lot of makeup and do certain things and make certain sacrifices to make herself look beautiful. And all Vaughn has to do is change her physical appearance, or she doesn't have to change. She just has to make you see. She has to manipulate your mind, which is hard. Which I'm sure to an extent is hard in itself until you get used to it and it becomes just a second nature to you for these people. Because it's not like they're born with the gift, but it's not like they can do it that quickly. So, so that is my first one. Okay, so next favorite villain is one that's less human. And that is Pennywise the Clown, or It. Pennywise is being one of its favorite forms in the story. This is from Stephen King's It. It was my first Stephen King novel ever, and it's still considered my favorite of Stephen King's works. And in case you don't know, it is about this town that's haunted by this fear demon that they sometimes call It. He takes whatever you're afraid of, whatever scares you the most. He particularly goes after children. And in the 50s, he went after this particular group of children, these seven kids who form a group of friendship. And years later, as an adults, they're forced to face, even though when they were kids, they believed they killed It. They are forced to come back as adults and fight It again. And this is like so terrifying because it reminds you of what scared you as a child. It brings, as you're reading it, like Stephen King has a way with words, and it's not even lyrical writing or anything. It's not even flowery. It's just, he just has a way. He just has a way with words, and really pulling you into his world of story, the story he has created. And it makes you reminisce about your own childhood fears and how vulnerable we are as children. And even as adults, we're vulnerable, but as adults, we're able to dismiss things because we know logically that it's easier for us to believe to realize it's not real, it's only in our minds and our imaginations, and there's always some logical explanation. I mean, that's why, like in fantasy stories or paranormal stories, the adults dismiss the thing that we say we're afraid of. Like, the ghost, if we see a ghost, they say, it's just your imagination, it's not real. But this book is so terrifying. And Pennywise, but it's not just the book, it's like, so let me just talk about Pennywise, because I'm actually going to use this book again in another Top 5 Wednesday. But Pennywise is just, he's so creepy and scary. I mean, I think he's one of the reasons why a lot of people are afraid of clowns. I don't know, he's not my reason, actually. I mean, yes, he is, but the first clown that I realized that made me scared of clowns, I think, was probably Zebo the Clown on Are You Afraid of the Dark? The episode Laughing in the Dark. But because I actually kind of got into this late mid-teen years, I think, is when I finally, discovered this and discovered, the story of the Losers Club and It. But he, like I said, he takes the form of whatever thing scares you the most. And the fact that he's a clown, that makes it even more terrifying. Because clowns, originally, they were meant to entertain you, especially entertain children, and make you laugh, and make you smile, and make you feel good and stuff. And it's just so, and I think what scares people about clowns is they're covered in makeup, and they're just all crazy and silly the whole time, and I think that kind of can make you nervous as a kid, because you don't know what they look like underneath. And there actually is a serial killer, Ed Gein, I can't pronounce his last name, that a famous serial killer who took the form was his regular job was a clown. Because he knew that because he had said, like, I watched a documentary on it, and he says, like, in the reenactment they were doing, one of the lines was how clowns can get away with stuff. Because they're silly and supposed to be friendly and be entertaining and stuff, so no one would suspect, at the time, no one would suspect a clown. And now, of course, we realize, we have books like it that, make us more terrified of clowns, so they can't get away with it. A serial killer probably could not get away with being although, no, a while back, after the 2017 movie, after that was put out there and stuff, and they were remaking this one, because they made a city, and back in 1990, there was a miniseries, a TV miniseries, which I have both that one, and then I have the part 1 of the new remake, or reboot, or whatever you want to call it. There was a time when a bunch of people would dress up like clowns and, kill people, and there was like a big story going on where that actually happened. But anyway, the fact that this creature can take the form of whatever you're afraid of, makes it all the more scary. And he shows no mercy, and he's like he's also like a vampire and a zombie mixed together, because he will bite off body parts of you, and it's just terrifying, and that's what makes him a good villain. It's just the fact that he's not that he's human, but that he's terrifying. He's so scary, and I love that about Stephen King, is he's good with, he's the king of horror. No pun intended. Actually, pun intended. Okay, next. Number 2 is now this is a villain that you haven't really officially met in person. You just hear his voice and you are aware of his presence. But I don't think the characters have, I think in the second book, our main character, because the second book of this particular one, this particular series, or trilogy now, I think she's met him, or she's heard his voice, or received messages from him. And I am talking about Legend from the Caraval trilogy. I think it's called, I don't know if the trilogy is actually called Caraval. I don't like, I guess, yeah, Caraval novel. I never really, one of my pet peeves is when an author basically just takes the title of the first book and makes it the title of the whole trilogy, or the whole series, or the whole duology. That really bugs me. It's like, you didn't, of course, I guess I can't really judge them, because I'm sure it is really hard to come up with a creative title that sums up the whole story. But I don't know, as someone who hasn't gone through that process yet, I still feel a little cheapened by the fact that when an author just takes the title of the first book. I understand TV show-wise, like, Song of Ice and Fire series, on the TV show title was changed to Game of Thrones. That sounds more catchy and easier to say, and you can turn it into an acronym that you can say without trying to figure out, like, what does that mean? How am I supposed to say this? Like Once Upon a Time, that's a common phrase itself, but the acronym itself, how would you say that? Like, at least with a Game of Thrones, you can say GOT. You can refer to it as GOT in a conversation, and people will know what you're talking about. So that does sound better. But anyway, like I said, I'm talking about Caraval in Legend from the Caraval series. Like I said, you never see him. You only receive messages from him, and some of the character of Tella, she's heard him speak to her and everything. And at one point, I think in this book, you thought a certain character was Legend, and it turns out he wasn't. But what I like is the ominous presence he gives off, even if we've never actually really met him yet. That's why I picked this one, because even though you never met him, his presence is still there, and it's kind of creepy, because you don't know what he looks like, you've never met him in person. You almost think he's immortal, in fact, because he's been around since these two girls' mom was around. So he must be pretty old, but I consider him a good villain because you don't know about his you haven't seen him. You've just received messages from him, and you know the stories. He's not just called Legend because that's his name, but also he really is a legend in itself. You know, there's so many stories about this guy, and he has such a reputation, and I think that makes him even more scary because you don't know what you're going to get with this guy. You don't know if he's immortal, if he's powerful. Maybe he's not that way, and he just is intimidating, and he just knows how to make himself look intimidating and build up a reputation, even if he doesn't have the skill. Even if he isn't really as intimidating as they think or as powerful as they think. Maybe that's the case, or maybe he really is. That's the thing. That's what makes him a good villain, I think, because you don't know. You don't know anything about him except for that he's created this magical carnival that's full of mystery and wonder, and you can't really trust anything around you, and he's creepy, and he's like a celebrity that you never seen before. And he doesn't seem to care what happens to people. He doesn't care if people die or not, at least as far as we know. Because when the series started in this book, you find there's a story about a woman that died years ago, and that's why the carnival stopped, hasn't moved around as much. So I don't know if he's a villain or not. But as of right now, I feel he's a villain. So maybe this wasn't the best choice, but to me, he feels like a villain. Even though he hasn't really done anything. So I guess it's kind of a weak choice, but I'm going with it. I don't have time to come up with anything else. I'm already in the middle of this. So, the problem with this is there's so many other choices of people that I think would be good villain that are probably good on this list, but I have not finished the book. Like Dr. Hannibal Lecter from the Hannibal series. I don't even know if that's what it's called, but I'm calling it that for now. But yeah, I think he would be a good villain too, but I have not actually read the books. I've only seen the movie, so I feel like it's cheating if I mention him. And I guess I can mention a character from Game of Thrones too. I don't know who I will mention because there's so many characters. But I think last time we did this topic, I said Cersei as a villain, and she's still, to this day, I think she's still a great villain. She kind of reminds me of Levana in a way, except for without the power to manipulate by electricity. She's a regular human. She's just really smart. So I guess I could have said her over, like, Legend or something. But anyway. Okay, so next, number 4 is... Now, this character, I don't know if you would call him a villain. I don't know if other people would call him a villain. But in the first book, and in the second book, in the first book he is, I feel like, or he's one of the villains, but he's also someone who's being used by a main villain as well, so he's also kind of a puppet villain, like, where he's not the true bad guy. But in the second one, it's also very interesting, because once again, he's being used by someone else. So, he's not exactly a villain, per se. He's more of a victim, but he does some villainous things because of what his masters force him to do, I don't know if... And that is Holland from the Shades of Magic trilogy. Holland is like an Izantari, like our main character, Kel. And in the first book, he's working for the Dane twins, who are ruling White London, which has slowly been killed by magic. But in the second one, Okay, I'm going to spoil a little bit here, and I'll warn you in my little description box. He is being possessed by this darkness from Black London, which I think the darkness is partially responsible. And I guess I could have said that one instead of Holland, but I didn't think about that guy, that thing, or I don't know what, the darkness or whatever. But he's done some. Holland's done really. He's done some pretty villainous things. But, of course, it's like I said, this is why this one is debatable, because it's not his choice to do these villainous things. And it's not just, I had a crappy childhood, so now I'm doing evil things in the process, because I'm angry and bitter and my life sucked as a kid. But because, he's actually being controlled by someone else. So again, maybe this is reaching here and people are gonna, get on my case about it and be like, Holland's not a villain. And, and again, before you do that, I agree, he's not a true villain. And I admit he's being controlled, so maybe that makes him not a villain at all. But he does some bad things. He makes bad choices. Of course, that's because, again, I am well aware that he's been controlled in both books, both the first and the second book. So maybe I should have chosen the darkness, but you know what? Screw it. I chose Holland, so deal with it. But anyway, he's been killing people. He will kill people to get, to do what he has to get to Cal and everything and get what he needs to get for the the Dane twins in the first book, and then this one, he's possessed. So yes, it's true, the guy cannot catch a break. And he just wants to live his life, so, like I said, it's kind of too late. I'm already doing this, so I can't really take it back. But he does some pretty, he's one of those villains who, like Levana, only difference being Levana is more of a villain than Holland is. Holland thinks he's doing right by letting this guy help him preserve his home to make it beautiful again, and he's willing to suck the life out of Red London in the process. And of course, I'm sure he regrets it now, because now he's no longer in control at all, and the darkness, the true villain of the story, has basically taken over his life and taken him over. But yeah, so so that one's I admit that one's debatable, and people will probably get mad at me about it, but you know what? I'm gonna say I'm sticking with it because I can't take it back. There'd be no point. Okay, so the last one I don't physically have, and the last one is another debatable case, and that is Prince Carden from The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. I just read this one last month. I think it was last month. Or it might have been in August when I read it. No, I think I read in September. I don't remember. But anyway, sure all of you know what The Cruel Prince is about. These two sisters, after this fae in general shows up at their house, coming to claim his lover, who was a human woman who's now married. He's come to claim her. Everything he does challenges them, and then he ends up killing the girl's parents. And he takes his own biological child, the oldest daughter, who's, I can't remember her name at the moment, and it's Jude, Taryn, and I don't remember the other one, the one who's full-on fae, or half-fae. He takes her and her two sisters, who he feels obligated, because they are his lover's daughters. He takes them to be raised in fairy, but of course they're half human, so they are treated like crap by the fae. And June, our main character, is determined to prove herself and prove that she's not just a worthless mortal human, that she's just as powerful and just as good and badass as the fae, even if she's not immortal, even if she could technically die. And she's bullied by the fae constantly, and they're saying, you're pathetic, you're weak and stuff, and she wants to become, a soldier, a knight, and her father's for the king, but her father is like, no, you can't, you're not ruthless enough and everything, so it's most of the book is about her proving herself, proving she can be just as worthless and just as dangerous. And Carden is one of the many princes in the story, and he's one of the, and why I think he's a bad guy is because he bullies Jude a lot, and he's mean to her, he's an asshole to her all the time, and he, and although, well, I guess you could say that the true is, again, this one is so debatable. I know I was just trying to think of people really quickly, so I would have top 5 of these, and so some of my choices are probably not the best choices, and people will probably get mad at me and be like, no, these aren't villains, these characters aren't villains, and I also didn't want to choose the same ones, and ones that are really super popular people would automatically choose. But he is such, and I think in the second book, he's gonna be even worse. He's gonna be even worse to Jude in the second book, and I do not know how that guy could be a love interest, because people have implied that he's a love interest for Jude, and I don't see it. He's too much of an asshole, and too wicked, and he has ill intentions, but he does kind of, by the end of the book, he kind of does show that he has a good side, a softer side, as good as he can be, and he does ally himself with Jude. So he's not the true villain of the story. Again, this is just these last two are very weak choices, I imagine, but again, I'm not going to change it. I just chose them, and I'm already filming this, and this is already getting a pretty long video. So, those are my villains. Hate me if Judd, give me a hard time if you must about the last two. I don't care. But those are my top 5 villains. Do you guys have whether you want to do the top 5 Wednesday or not, what are some characters that you think are villains? Your favorite villains, or pick some characters that you think you see them as villains, but maybe not everybody else does, or the reverse, where a character that you absolutely love and see them more as a victim than a villain, but everyone else says they're a villain. For instance, Snape on Harry Potter. I think there's people that see him as a victim, and then there's people that are like, I don't get it, Snape's an asshole. He's done the reason why his bullying Harry is, isn't what him being bullied and then bullying Harry, who's the son of the one who bullied him, is not an excuse. Or, he's someone that he got bullied, he had a hard time in school, and people, so he's still angry and bitter, and you should sympathize with this character, because he had a really sucky life, and then the girl he was in love with abandoned him and stuff like that. So anyway, an example of a villain that is someone that people, you're either one side or the other about your feelings on the character. Okay, I'm done rambling. So if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and click subscribe if you have not already and happen to like this video and like my other videos. And I will post the link. I will post the link below to the top 5 Wednesday group in case you want to join, or if you just want to, make these videos, the top 5 videos. And I will talk to you all later. Alright, bye. Enjoy your reading.